Hi, folks. Chris Mask from Eastling Community TV's Off the Chip Wagon. Also happen to be a food sport competitor. MasterChef Canada Season 2, you might have seen me on that, or rather not seen me. It was very short-lived, unfortunately. Stupid sauce. And Wall of Chefs, Season 1, Episode 1. He did a lot better on that one. I won that one. Been to the World Food Championships a couple times. I was 11th in the world in bacon in 2019. Unfortunately, I didn't go last year because of the whole COVID situation. Also have a competitive barbecue team out of Sudbury, Broken Antler Barbecue, and we're hoping to be back on the Canadian Barbecue Society circuit as well, do a couple dates in the US, hopefully if things go well this summer. The public library approached me and asked if I'd be interested in talking food, and hey, I'm always up for that, right? But to piggyback onto that, I was asked to do a cooking demo. And I've never recorded a cooking demo before, so this is all new ground for me. And if you're going to do it, you might as well do it with something that's very familiar so you don't screw it up. That's why we're going to talk about Caribbean cooking. Yeah, you heard me, Caribbean cooking. The reason why I went with that is because, let's face it, the weather outside, it's frightful, and a nice fire in your belly can be really quite delightful. So we're going to talk about a land of spice. But right now, let's get that stigma out of our head. Caribbean cooking is not over-the-top, face-melting spicy. It's as hot as you really want to make it. It's about knowing limitations and knowing how to use your ingredients. When we talk about Caribbean cooking, it's more than just Jamaican. You know, this encompasses Barbados, Trinidad, Tobago, Antigua, even Puerto Rico is considered under the umbrella of Caribbean cooking. A lot of influences went into it. Africa, East Indian, the Arab and Middle Eastern countries, Chinese as well, and then there's local cultural fare that go into it. And when you think about Caribbean cooking, right off the top, you're thinking Jamaican jerk, right? And I mean, that's something that's exclusive to Jamaica, right? Wrong. You see, there are different cuisines that have a variation of jerk in their pantry, so to speak. So we're looking at Africa, we're looking at Portugal that has a version of a jerk spice, and even Latin America, though you might know it more as a mojo sauce. Whatever you want to call it, it is an incredible spice blend which can bring some big flavors to just about any dish out there. And there are some perfectly good store-bought, pre-made spice packages, and whether it's a rub or a sauce that you want to buy that has jerk on the package. But at the end of the day, do like my parents did and make your own jerk. Actually, I'm talking about spice blend. And no, they didn't actually make it, but I did. So right here, this is a dry jerk spice. And you get your mortar and your pestle, you can grind it up, and this way you can really control the heat on this as well. When you're talking about making these spices and Caribbean cooking, you want to try to stay true to the ingredients in that list of things like rice and beans, plantain, sweet potatoes, cilantro, that's really big in it, bell peppers, and coconut, which ironically was introduced to the island by Christopher Columbus in the 1400s. There's a little nugget for your next Jeopardy game. Spices like cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, turmeric, thyme, cumin, all big. And then there's something called allspice, which is not actually a spice blend. A lot of times they will just blend spices together and call it allspice because it's cheaper to buy that way. But the actual berry grows on an evergreen tree, and once dried out and you grind it up, that's where it tastes like allspice, so to speak. And that's like a combination of nutmeg, clove, black pepper, and a little bit of cinnamon in there as well. Adding cinnamon to just about anything you make when it comes to Caribbean cooking is kind of like putting cinnamon in your chili, and it creates a faux heat. So it's like a fake heat, not like a Scotch bonnet or black pepper, you know, if you're looking at other cuisines like jalapeno or habanero or ghost pepper. But it does create a nice, you know, fake heat, so to speak. The flavor profiles of Caribbean cooking, it's pretty expansive when you go down that rabbit hole, and it really is quite interesting when you start researching it. What we're going to do today is a couple different dishes. And actually, it's two things that are going to combine to make one dish. So it's not really like I'm making two dishes, but you'll see what I mean. We're going to start with jerk. And we already talked about this. Jerk spice, there's dry, and then there's wet as well. And when it comes to making a wet jerk rub, basically, it's like a marinade. Try to use the fresh ingredients. In the world of convenience, yeah, you can find things like this, garlic in a tube, so you don't have to cut up the garlic. But when it's calling for ginger, use actual ginger root. Don't just go and use the powdered stuff. And you know, like green onions, scallions, fantastic for this. Fresh cilantro, fresh thyme. Use the fresh ingredients. Soy sauce. This is not conventional. I've been told some people put cola or root beer in their jerk mix. I know it's not traditional, but it really does add a whole new depth of flavor to it. You throw this through a food processor or the blender, and you get a lovely paste. And this paste here, again, can be as hot as you want it. You can put this in the fridge, put it in an airtight container. It's good for about 3 months. You can put it in the freezer. It's good for about a year. What we're going to put this on, we're not going to do traditional chicken. We're going to actually keep this vegetarian, and we're going to use mushrooms. And I really like jerk seasoning on mushrooms. If you're down at the market, if you go see the folks at the Ugly Barn Farm, they have some beautiful oyster mushrooms that are usually readily available. You can find these in grocery stores as well. I just happen to like oyster mushrooms for the texture. I like the way they look as well. And you got to remember this with mushrooms. People often say, oh, I don't like mushrooms. Well, don't just lump everything all into one. Explore the different varieties of mushrooms. There might be something you actually like out there. My daughter, for example, just started getting into mushrooms. And I don't mean the experimental type of mushrooms, but I mean the actual eating mushrooms. But she doesn't know it because I hide it in food. Now, I did get some Chinese shiitakes recently, and when you cook those, they smell like wet sweat socks. So thank you, Russ and Emily, for that. These, not so much, but they are a good meaty mushroom, and they really take on that jerk flavor quite well. You got to remember that with Caribbean cooking, we're not going to look at deep frying. We're not going to have something that's overly oily. So with this jerk seasoning, basically, we are going to put that marinade on these mushrooms, and then we're going to pop them in the oven at 350 for about 20 minutes. You're going to make sure you flip them over so they get crispy on both sides. The thing is with cooking mushrooms, you got to be aware of your moisture content. So it's not something that you can just kind of set it, forget it, and walk away from. You really should be checking on them pretty regularly, because if you draw out too much moisture, that's where they turn into pencil erasers. It really is a fine line when it comes to doing things like roasting mushrooms. And the reason why we're actually even roasting mushrooms for this dish, other than the fact I like it and I think it's a great accompaniment to the soup that we're going to make, a lot of Caribbean cooking, it involves roasting, and it involves flame grilling. Yeah, they use pimento wood a lot of times, but you know what? You can kind of fake that if you get a couple of cloves of nutmeg and just throw those whole nutmegs into the bottom of your barbecue or put them into your smoker box, and kind of gives you a fake kind of pimento wood. There's another little tip for you there. Maybe one day we'll talk about barbecue, because talking about barbecue also brings us to one other really important component to any kind of jerk rub and spice mix that you're making. It's sugars. And you're going to want to use a brown sugar, not a white sugar, for this. A couple of reasons for that. One, the brown sugar is actually generally made with molasses, so you get a more deep, umami kind of flavor to it. And a lot of times here as well with sugars, something that I've learned from the barbecue circuit is that different sugars burn at different temperatures. So you got to be careful what you use. I'm actually going outside the box with this, and I'm using another local product here from the Seguins and the Sugar Bush in Noelville. This is maple sugar. So this is going to give us a nice flavor as well. When you're putting your spice blends together for this particular dish and this particular soup, you're going to need some curry powder. And anytime you're putting any of your spices together, I like to put spices in a little dish like this before I use them, because you want to toast them. And that goes with this, or if it's going to go with the jerk rub that you're going to put on something. Toasting the spices brings out natural oils, and it just gives it a much deeper flavor to things. But don't burn it. Burning spices, that's bad all around. It's just going to make things taste bitter. Never burn garlic. Burnt garlic is terrible. But this curry powder, along with some salt, some pepper, a little bit of cinnamon, what we're going to do is we're going to coat our vegetables in that, and then we're going to roast them. Again, I like roasting. You could put these directly into the pot, and just make it like you would a normal soup, but roasting is going to bring out that extra little bit of flavor. And again, those natural sugars, it's going to give it just a much deeper, like, flavor bomb in your mouth, more or less. The thing is with your vegetables for this particular soup, Pumpkin is fantastic if you can find pumpkin, but the only pumpkin I could find at this time of the year was canned pumpkin. So what I went with was butternut squash. I've got some sweet potatoes in here. I've got some carrots, some celery, some onions, so that's almost like a little mirepoix. I've got some rutabaga as well. And you're going to coat these all up with oil. You're going to go and you're going to throw on your spice blend, mix that up, your sugar, and then you're going to pop that in the oven, 350, for about roughly 60 to 90 minutes. And you'll get a good idea of how the roasting is coming, because again, you're going to check on them, not like the mushrooms, because you don't want to burn them. When it's all said and done though, you're going to end up with these beautifully roasted vegetables, gorgeous color on them. I mean, you'll see also they didn't really lose too much size, but that flavor is going to make this soup out of this world. So what we're going to do is we're going to move over to the stove, and we'll get into the actual cooking process for this soup next. All right, so now it's time to start putting things together. And I'm going to have the full recipe for you at the end of this video. If you don't want to see this part, obviously you can just kind of skip ahead. But this kind of explains a few more of the steps you want to do. So you notice that I do have a saute pan, and I've got a pot here, which is basically going to act as my stock pot. A little smaller because I'm doing a fraction of the size of the recipe that this normally is, just for kind of time constraints. So in my pan, I want a little bit of EVO, extra virgin olive oil. Obviously, if you really wanted to, you could use butter as well, but then you wouldn't be so vegetarian vegan along with this, now would you? So in this pan, once this oil comes to temperature, what I'm going to do is put the rest of my red onion. And you can use a Spanish onion in this as well, but red onion is what I had in the fridge, so hey, that's what we're going with for this demo. And basically, we do not want to burn this. What we want to do with this is basically sweat it out for a bit. And by sweating it out for a bit, we just want to soften it up, and that's why you want to use low heat. It's going to take a little bit of time for that. Put it at about medium heat, so like a 4 or 5, I guess, depending on what your stove is. If you're using gas, kind of gauge that. Now in this pot here, this is where our roasted vegetables are going to go. Not the mushrooms. The mushrooms are the topper, but our vegetables that we spiced up and roasted for about an hour at 350. In here though, we need to add our liquid. So that's why we're going with about 3 cups of vegetable stock. Seems like a lot, but it actually isn't that much. And now you want coconut milk. And you can make your own if you really want to pulp a coconut and go through all that, or just buy the canned coconut milk. I want about a half a cup to this. So right there, that is the liquid that's going in here. Now, our vegetables. Roasted, whole, just dump them in. We're going to eventually put this through an immersion blender or a Kitchen Ninja, whatever you happen to have handy. And that's what's going to turn it nice and smooth. If you really want to turn it into more almost like a veloute, you could actually put it through a strainer and then get it really velvety, but it's entirely up to you. Leave some chunks in there if you want some body and texture to it, but again, the mushrooms, they're going to do that for you. So right now, our onions, they're getting happy. You can hear them starting to pop a little bit. Basically, don't let them brown. Again, we want to let them sweat. And then when we start seeing them become a little more on the translucent side, so they're starting to lose their color, they're almost looking like, well, basically you can almost see through them if they were to cook a little bit longer, but again, not turning brown. That's the point where we're going to add our garlic and our ginger. So you could use that paste like I showed you. You could spend the time and just dice it up yourself like I did here. You can use dry. Depends on what your time is and really what your comfort level is for making this. Again, the important thing is we do not want this to brown, particularly the garlic, because that's going to make everything bitter. And bitter garlic, yeah. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt, I think. Bitter garlic, bleh. Now, once all this goes in here, if you think your temperature is too high, obviously you can turn it down a little bit. But again, the key is to make it happy in the pan and not actually brown it, like to the point where you're starting to burn it. All while this is going on, this is again set to about a medium heat. So here's where that vegetable stock and the coconut milk and those roasted vegetables, this is where it's going to start to simmer. And when it simmers, that's where the flavors from the vegetables are going to start going out into basically the liquid here. The final part to it is going to be when we add this into here. And again, how we talked about when you're working with any kind of herbs, try and use fresh where you can. A big mistake a lot of people do is they'll cut up fresh herbs and they'll put it directly into the pan or into the pot or whatever right when they're starting off their cooking, but it actually doesn't do that much for you. You're going to end up burning them and kind of wasting those flavors. So that's why we add them at a later stage here. Now you're going to notice bay leaves. And yeah, I actually go and find fresh bay leaves because I'm silly like that. Now we've got fresh thyme. We've got orange zest in here as well. And this basically is all going to go in here with the onions, the garlic, and the ginger. And this is the point where it's going to get super fragrant. And that's exactly what you want. Like, I mean, right now, oh, it just smells wonderful. We need smell-o-vision on these things here. So now we'll just mix this around here. We'll get our orange zest incorporated into everything. And at this point here, giving that heat to that orange zest, it's bringing out the oils in that little bit of the orange peel that's in there. That's what orange zest is basically. And that's why you don't want to have that white pith in there. And now you can see our onions. They're getting that translucent as I try and pull one out here like that. You can see how they're kind of looking a little bit more see-through. That's what we want. So now we can take this, as we've released those natural oils, and put all that into our soup. And our soup here, give it a little mix. This is now going to simmer on a low heat. Once those bubbles start, reduce the heat down to low and just let it get happy on the stove for about an hour or so. And then at that point, you're going to transfer it over into a food processor, or again, whatever kind of blender, immersion blender if you have that with the wand, put that in there and turn this into a puree. While you're doing this, this is the perfect opportunity where you can go and roast your mushrooms, because ideally when your mushrooms are all said and done, they're going to come out looking nice and crispy. And again, moisture content. So you see, still kind of floppy mushrooms. We're good with that. But look at the beautiful color that's on this. I mean, that's ideally what you want there. Beautiful color. So these are our jerk spiced oyster mushrooms, which are going to go on top of our squash soup by the time it's all said and done. So we'll be back with that. Okay, so final steps here. We take that pot that's been simmering with the big roasted chunks of vegetable in it, and now you're going to throw it through a blender. You're going to put it through a food processor, use your immersion blender, whatever. But you have a decision to make. Do I want chunks or not? If you want chunks, keep in mind you're going to have really noticeable herbs in there as well, which kind of do look pretty, but maybe texturally for some people might be a little bit off-putting. But I mean, that's entirely up to you. That's again why I like to use the fresh bay leaves, just because it's not as crunchy as the stuff that you're going to buy if you get them already dried for yourself. If you do pass it through that fine mesh sieve though, you're going to get that really velvety texture, and it really is a beautiful soup. This is the final opportunity for you though to season. So here's where you're going to adjust your spices. Make sure you got enough garlic, ginger, you got enough heat. You can always add more heat. You can't really take it away. The other thing is salt. Again, don't oversalt, don't undersalt. It's finding that balance. In fact, a concept when it comes to cooking is acid, fat, salt, heat. So really, in this dish, we've got the fat from the coconut milk. We've got the salt from the kosher salt that I use, but I mean, you could use Himalayan sea salt, Icelandic birch smoked salt. Yeah, I got that in my pantry. Whatever salt you really want. Heat, Scotch bonnets, we can jack that up with whatever pepper. And remember, the cinnamon's also going to give you a little bit of fake heat. But the question now comes down to, well, Chris, where's my acid? And that's where, like the song says, you put the lime in the coconut. So here you go. You just squeeze that over top of your soup. Now, when you're ready to plate this up, you put it into a nice bowl We get some of our jerk roasted mushrooms. Remember, we got to watch that moisture content because we don't want pencil erasers. We don't want them turned into mushroom jerky either. And then you can put on some cilantro. I got some green onion. And what I also did is I made a maple crema with the coconut milk and some local Sege maple syrup. And really turns into a beautiful dish when it's all said and done. So this right here is that more veloute one, so the smooth looking one. And this one here is the one where we left some chunks in there, so there's a little bit more texture to it. And you can actually see the difference if you look really carefully. But I mean, both of these, regardless, they are a delicious bowl of soup, perfect for a winter's day, or if you just need a little bit of down-home comfort food. And again, I made a half recipe for this. I'll put the recipe up at the end of this video. If you want more heat, you can always add additional heat in whatever capacity you want. Heartbeat Hot Sauce, in fact, makes a pineapple hot sauce. They're from Thunder Bay. They make craft hot sauce. Fantastic product, which is local to Northern Ontario. That really does pair perfectly with this. But thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If there's anything in specific, some kind of specific dish or anything in particular you want to see sometime in the future, assuming that I'm asked to make more of these videos, reach out to the library. They'll contact me, or you can find me on social media as well. So thanks for watching. Everybody stay safe, and bon appetit.